Chapter 1. Meet Leo. The courage to be is rooted in the God who appears, when God has disappeared, in the anxiety of doubt. Paul Tillich. When our neighbors were the victims of an attempted break-in, they decided it was time for a guard dog. So they bought a Doberman Pinscher puppy and named him Leo. We watched Leo grow up, running around with little cones taped to his ears, training them to stand fiercely at attention. Leo has seen members of our family regularly enough to know who we are. We live right next door. Our presence is an everyday occurrence in his life. But any time he hears us leave or arrive home, he barks vigilantly as if we are dangerous intruders, as if we pose a menacing threat to his existence. He can't seem to distinguish between friend and foe. We always just say, "Hi, Leo," and walk past his alarmed yapping. I have named my brain Leo in his honor. Since childhood, my conscience has had a high startle reflex, barking incessantly at me, often unnecessarily. I have frequently described it as a seared conscience, although I'm sure that's not how the Apostle Paul used the term. It just felt damaged in some way that made it hypervigilant. A few years ago, things intensified. I found my head suddenly bombarded by a barrage of disturbing ideas and images that sent me into a tailspin. My mind raised the alarm at these thoughts that felt threatening and unstoppable, even when their only real power lay in my fear of them. I had no idea at the time that I was exhibiting the classic symptoms of someone with a full-blown clinical case of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Specifically, psychologists would categorize my experience as fitting in the subset of OCD known as scrupulosity, but more on that later. The anxiety overwhelmed me. My response to the alarm was to try and tighten control of my mind. I circled my wagons and shrunk my world to avoid triggers, which only worsened the situation. Imagine noticing a leaky faucet, then cranking the knob so hard that it breaks off and water gushes out. The more I tried to rein in my mind, the stronger the torrent of thoughts became. This only increased my fears and made me try harder. It was a bewildering, corrosive cycle. And Leo barked ever louder. Badly shaken, I went on a walk with my good friend Bill, who just happens to be a therapist by profession. He listened graciously as the words and tears poured out. I tried unsuccessfully to make sense of what was happening. I was a terrified, jumpy wreck. When I ran out of words, in utter disbelief, I said emphatically, "I'm not an anxious person." Bill laughed, out loud. Not the response I was going for. I wanted some comfort, some gentle reassurance that could bring me back to rationality. Instead, he laughed at my declaration that I wasn't anxious. He wasn't being mean. It was an involuntary, irrepressible reaction that seemed to say, "You're kidding, right? Have you even looked at yourself?" That single laugh pulled me up short. I've always seen myself as an even-keel, unflappable type. And I took for granted I had a strong mind with a firm grip on that mind at all times. This was not like me, was it? This fearful person battling unspeakable thoughts, this person who wanted to withdraw completely into a shell of avoidance. Who was I? One night, lying in bed, struggling against panic as my mind spun itself into another frenzy, I reached for the armor of God. I knew how Paul described it in his letter to the Ephesians. Ephesians 6:10-17. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God.